Hello, today is April 13th, 2009. We're meeting today with Mr. Cecil Graff, who goes by Bill, at his home in Fort Morgan, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Bill, and thanks for participating in the project today. Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
Well, I was born at Weldona, Colorado, on a farm, 8, 8, and 22. I enlisted in the Navy, and I and a friend went to Denver and intended to join the Marines.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Well, they got to the Marine office and the man wasn't there, so we went down the hall and joined the Navy.
Is that right?
Thank goodness.
Now, what at first made you want to join the Marines? What was the attraction there?
Well, just something. We certainly wanted to avoid being in the Army. We didn't care for that at all. And like I say, fortunately, we got in the Navy where...
Yeah. Now, was this after Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Do you remember where you were when you'd heard Pearl was bombed?
Oh, I was at home on the farm.
Uh-huh.
And then we was inducted on the 6th day of 1942 and went to San Diego, California.
Sixth of what?
Of January.
So that's much sooner, right after Pearl,
Yes.
then. Oh boy.
So...
And you said you shipped off to San Diego for boot camp?
No, we went from San Diego, went to San Diego to the boot camp from Denver. And the boot camp was so full that they bunked us in Balboa Park. And so then we went from Balboa Park to the destroyer base. That's where we went through our
Basic.
They were training us to be armed guard for merchant ships.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, when you say we, are you still with your buddy at this time? Did you guys go together?
No,
Or?
we got separated.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
How was that? I'm going to keep interrupting you with questions. I hope you don't mind.
That's
But how was that transition? I imagine you'd grown up your whole life around Weldona and hadn't probably traveled a whole lot, and now you're off to California. Was that much of a Was it much of a transition going from civilian life to military life? And how was it the transition being away from home? Did you get any sort of homesickness, anything like that?
Well, I assume that we did, yes. We missed a lot of our friends and family and all of this, That, anyway, after we finished our basic in San Diego, we went to New Orleans, Louisiana. That was where was going to be our home base. And from New Orleans we went down the coast to, got on a brand new Liberty ship. Never been to sea before.
Right, here's a farm boy from Colorado. How was that? Did you get your sea legs, or did you get?
Well, I didn't, but a whole bunch did for some reason. Anyway, we went to Philadelphia and loaded with ammunition and all kinds of, well, we had trucks, tanks, whatever, on the deck of the ship.
Uh-huh.
And as we were leaving Philadelphia, it would run aground. So then we went to Hoboken, New Jersey, and they unloaded the ship and repaired it and reloaded it. And then we were headed for Iceland to go into a convoy going to Russia.
Wow, holy cow.
So anyway, when we got to Iceland, we was there for a week or so, but anyway, they issued us rubber suits so that if we ever had to go in the water, we would have some protection. Well, that didn't work. Anyway, when we was in Iceland, we decided we better try these here rubber suits. So we jumped in and was swimming around, but then one fellow, instead of jumping in, he dove in. You can imagine what that air did, that thing, and we had an awful time getting him straightened out before he drowned. Anyway, we left there and we had 41 ships in the convoy, had sub-chasers and destroyers from England as
Your escort?
escort, and then of course we had a converted carrier with us. Now I can't tell you how many planes was on this here little carrier. But anyway, we were under fire for 8 straight days. And when they was loading the ship in Hoboken, we noticed a whole bunch of Scotch that came aboard. So we was continuously lost from the convoy, and fortunately we were lost and
Lost all out by yourself?
all by ourselves.
Boy, wouldn't that, with all the U-boats in the area, that had to be frightening, I would think.
Well, it was. But anyway, we got lost, and the ship that took our place in the column, the next day the aircraft came in and dropped a bomb right in the middle of it, and it just blew up.
Is that right?
There was nothing left of it but a black spot.
So, like, you're saying that had you guys not gotten lost, we would have been hit.
That saved our lives. So, anyway, we got into, I can't even pronounce the name of the town, but anyway, we got there. It wasn't, and
This was in Russia?
in Russia,
Okay.
and they put the prisoners aboard to unload the ship. And when we got the ship unloaded, why, then they sent a bunch of women aboard to load it back up with pulpwood to come back to the States. Well, in the meantime, it got terribly, terribly cold and we got froze in the ice. So we spent 3 months in Russia. So
What'd you guys do with your time? I mean, 3 months. How would you spend your time?
they wouldn't let us off of the ship only one day or one evening a week, and then we had to be escorted. For some reason, they didn't particularly like us.
So you'd be able to go into town and such, or what would you do with your one day off the ship?
Well, there was a place down there, a bar or whatever, we could go there and have a drink or whatever. But it didn't, didn't amount to anything. Anyway.
Did you interact with the Russians at all? Were you able to, with either the prisoners or those women or the town people at all? They wouldn't allow that.
No.
Isn't that something?
No.
How were conditions on the ship as far as...
Well, everything there was very well, other than we got short on food.
Right,
actually.
yeah.
And then finally they sent icebreakers in there to get us out of there. Well, anyway, when we finally got out of there and headed home, why, we got back to Iceland, and our officer went ashore with some other people, and we left before he got back aboard. So when we left there, we got lost from the convoy again and wound up in Nova Scotia.
Huh.
So
why'd you guys keep getting lost? Was it just the weather so bad that you would, or what would cause you guys to?
We never knew.
Oh.
Only that probably the old captain was drunk.
Oh, okay. Because of the Scotch here. I see the tie-in. Okay.
So we got out of there and got back to Boston, and we was there for Thanksgiving. And so we went ashore there, and some of one or two of the fellows in the crew, their home was there, so some of us went to their home for Thanksgiving dinner. And then we went from there to Baltimore, Maryland, to load the pulpwood, and of course, not having our officer with us, he had all of our information,
Paperwork and such.
with him, so we had to stay aboard until he got back from.
Oh boy.
So it was about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks before we finally got off of the ship. They couldn't pay us, they couldn't do anything. So the merchant crew took up donations amongst themselves, and so we had a little spending money while we was waiting to.
So really there was kind of 2 crews on the ship. There was the actual merchant crew, and then you were the Navy crew that were on to guard the...
All we did was man the guns.
Okay.
So anyway, when we got back, myself and the crew was given a medal from the Russian government for our part in getting
supplies over
to Russia, And we also shot enough planes down that we also got a kind of recommend, whatever, for that period of time. So then we went from there back to New Orleans, and from there we got transferred onto another Liberty ship, loaded it with all of the war material, and went to England. And from England we went to shoot. You better shut her off.
Shut her off.
Where we went to next was to load up sugar to come back to the States.
Would have been down in the Caribbean somewhere, maybe, or
Where did they?
Brazil, or the Caribbean.
No.
No. You went from England to this place, or did you
Yeah.
come back to the States?
No, we went from England there. Right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, while we was there, while they was loading the ship with the sugar, one of the crew, not one of our crew, the gunner crew, got drunk, and I don't know whether he wanted to commit suicide or what. But anyway, he jumped over the side, and I was on duty at the time, so I had to jump over the side, and we got him out, and
Was this while you were still in port, or were you guys out to sea?
no, we was in the port.
Uh-huh.
So got him to the hospital, and son of a gun jumped out the window and
Huh.
run down the street. Nightgown. So anyway, they had to discharge him and so on. We got back to the States, and back to New Orleans, and then they sent me to Washington, D.C. to go to an electric hydraulic school in preparation to put a new cruiser in commission. So I was there for 3 months going to school. Then I went and had some more, excuse me, gunnery or more practice anyway.
Mhm.
And then, of course, after we got back from, we had some R&R, home for leave,
Oh, so you got back to Weldona? Able to
Yeah.
come home? Okay.
and then after I went aboard the Astoria and went on a shakedown cruise. and
That was the name of the destroyer, the Astoria?
Astoria,
Oh, okay.
USS Astoria.
Okay.
And after the shakedown cruise, I had another leave, and that is when I married my wife.
Now, had you guys been dating? Is she a local girl, or how'd you meet your wife? Tell us a little story.
She was something that we knew going to school. But anyway, she went back to Philadelphia with me, and we went on another shakedown cruise, and then we got ready to go to the Pacific, so we went around and went through the canal.
Oh yeah. What was that like?
Oh, that was quite an experience.
Yeah.
And we got a little shore leave while we was there. And then we got to San Diego. One of the bearings went out in the shaft of the ship. So then we had to go to San Francisco and go into dry dock, cut the side out of the ship, and
Place that bearing, huh?
so we was there, I don't remember how long, but anyway, we went from there to Honolulu, and from Honolulu, why, we went to the Philippines, and went to Luzon and what have you. And we got in a terrible typhoon, and our ship came out of it all right, but some of the carriers, where the runway stuck out over the bow, I suppose you saw pictures of that. Well, that it just, them waves that break that.
Is that right? Wow.
So,
What was it like being on that ship during that typhoon? I mean, were you scared? I mean, what was?
well, I wasn't, because when we went in the Atlantic on those old Liberty ships, why, shoot,
The Northern Atlantic, some of the roughest water in the world. Yeah.
so it didn't bother me too much, but it did some, you know. Well, anyway, after Luzon, why, then, we made a lot of different areas, as we were escort, you see, for the carrier fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And so after we left the Luzon and some of that, why, then we wound up at Iwo Jima, and they were landing the Marines there, and so we were putting fire.
To soften the beach and what have you.
Yes.
So you were fairly close. Were you fairly close to?
Oh yes. So we spent 3 days there until we run out of ammunition anyway. So then we went back out and refueled, took on more ammunition, And then we went to Okinawa, and we cruised around that island for some time, and
Once again, providing shelling for the invasion?
yes,
Okay.
and well, then we had a lot of Jap aircraft that we was fighting off at that time.
Was that the time, were the kamikazes starting at that time at all, or was it just purely just aircraft, regular aircraft after you?
Well, I would say that there was more aircraft than submarines. They just didn't have that many submarines.
But I mean, as far as the aircraft, was it the kamikaze pilots, or?
Yes.
Oh boy. Now, were you on, once you got on the Destroyer, were you a gunner as well on that?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Was that your main, your main,
That was the main thing.
when you're in battle station, that was your battle station?
Well, I was in charge of a 5-inch twin mount anti-aircraft gun. Now, when I say 5-inch, we had a handling room underneath, which the elevator brought the shells up. It had a crew on the inside there to put the shells in the guns naturally, and all of this was, the gun was controlled by another.
Someone up on the bridge or something?
Yeah.
Okay. So were you inside the gun then? What's it like inside when those things are fired off? Is it,
Well,
I could just imagine this loud sound and.
well, if you was inside, you see, it was all enclosed.
Right.
But you see, as they call it a mount captain, I had to stick my head up out to a hatch in the back to make sure that we wasn't firing into some other ship
Right,
or
right.
whatever. So naturally, over a time, I lost my hearing. So anyway, after that, we started bombarding Japan itself. And we went in and we spent too long, and we went back out to refuel and take on more ammunition. Well, we got in another typhoon, and 3 destroyers run out of fuel, and they lost them.
Wow.
And the bow of our ship, it buckled up like, looked like a old washboard.
Oh, jeez.
So anyway, then they went in and bombarded the coast of Japan, and we come back out of there for a few days, and then they signed the peace treaty.
Well, now, you remember where you were when you heard we dropped the atomic bomb?
Yeah, we was at sea.
Yeah. Do you remember, could you have any idea what this thing was when you heard what it had done? Was there any concept of what this thing was?
you can imagine what the feeling was when we heard that they had dropped. But we wasn't, I guess, overexcited or
Yeah.
whatever.
How about on BJ Day? Was there excitement when you heard that finally the war's over? And
Oh yes, and then of course we went into the day that the peace treaty was signed. We was there in port, and we were picking up Marines or whatever that had put in their time to be discharged. And
so you were in Tokyo Harbor the day that signed on the Missouri then, huh?
yes, sir.
I'll be darned. Did you ever have a chance to go to shore?
Oh,
No?
no.
Okay.
No, never got ashore at all in Japan. And so we headed home, and I was thoroughly disgusted with our captain. You know, they had painted the decks gray, you know, or painted them. And so he had the hands out there scraping that paint off of them old deck. But shoot, they was going to have to scrap this here ship anyway when they got back to the States on account of the bad shape that it was in.
Right, sure.
So anyway, we got back to the States, and I was discharged on well, by the way, I spent 1,006 days at sea.
Wow.
And 347 days as land duty.
Wow.
And I was discharged from Shoemaker, California. Got on the train and come back to Denver. Met my wife there.
Do you remember the homecoming? It must have been a great thing to be back home and seeing your wife. It must have been a wonderful feeling. Huh?
It was. Yes, sir. It was great, really. And my parents owned a ranch, and so that's where I came back to, is to the ranch, and spent some time there, and then I went to work in the oil field. And that's where I spent the rest of my years until I retired.
In the oil industry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a drilling engineer. And
how many years altogether did you have in
35 years.
35, I'll be darned.
Yeah. Retired from that, and we bought us a fifth wheel and went to Arizona in the wintertime. And we spent 15 years in Arizona. And then we moved back here. I guess that's about it.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you some questions in regard to this history. Let's go back to your days on the Liberty ship. What from what I understand, those things were mass produced and they weren't all that well built.
No.
And a lot of them were lost at sea just by breaking in half and
Yeah.
such. Did you ever have any problems in that
No,
regard on
no,
your ship?
No.
Yeah. How were what were living conditions like on the Liberty ship as far as your?
Well, very comfortable,
Was it? Yeah.
actually. Now, our quarters was in midship, which wasn't too bad. But the fellows that had their quarters at aft, you can imagine
Oh, yeah.
how rough that would
Yeah.
be back there. We had excellent food, more so than any we'd gotten anywhere else.
Is that right?
As
Yeah.
far as the Navy was concerned. But, you know,
And you managed to stay warm enough.
Oh,
those,
yes.
being up in the North Atlantic and Russia and stuff, it was.
well, the North Atlantic was terribly cold after we left Iceland. Like I say, we got in those rubber suits, and you can imagine what that rubber did.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would sweat inside them or whatever, and we just like to froze to death. And then finally we just had to get rid of them blooming things. They weren't no good at all.
And they wouldn't have done you any good if you would have
No,
fallen over.
no,
You wouldn't have survived the North Atlantic.
No.
So, but you weren't inside the ship so much. You were out in the elements manning that gun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you came under German airplane attack. You said a number of times.
For 8 days.
8 days.
Yeah, you see though, the convoy that went ahead of us went to Archangel, and it was so close to Germany that it dang near eliminated it entirely. In fact, the English, there was quite a question whether they was even going to escort us on this next trip or not, because of losing so many ships.
Mm.
But they finally decided that they would escort us up there. Well, I don't think that they lost a ship at all, but then, you see, when the Germans, they didn't do any high altitude stuff. It was all, they'd come in and the ships was in columns, you see,
Mm-hmm.
and they could come in low altitude and just bail out and right over the top of the ship, you know. So, but then there was a lot of submarine lost, all ships lost by submarine also. But it was really miserable.
Did that play on your mind, knowing you got planes attacking you, you got the chance of a submarine attack? Did that ever?
Well,
It must have been a stressful situation.
It was.
And how did you deal with that stress? I mean, 8 days in a row of constant attack. How did you function with something in a situation
well,
like that?
we was just doing our best to protect ourselves. That was the only thing that we could do. You know, we got very little sleep, if any, at times. You know, so. But we was fortunate that the aircraft, it was all daylight when they would come in, you know, so that part, and of course you never knew about the submarines. And so consequently, like you say, it was very nerve-wracking, but we were very fortunate that we was able to protect our ship from any aircraft coming in and dropping anything on us, you know. It was amazing we were sitting there watching this other ship ahead of us when it was bombed, and there was the only thing that we could see left of that blooming thing was some floating tires or
Wow.
some rubbish or something of that kind, and it was just a big old, but, you know, everything in the holds of them ship was all ammunition or explosives of some kind.
Right. Holy cow. That must have been a sight to see.
Oh, it was.
Oh.
Boy. And my gun was right up in the bow of the ship, so I could had a better view than a lot of people did. So it was, well, I can pretty much see it, sit here and remember as it happened, you know.
Oh boy.
That was the only big disaster that, during my period in the Navy that we was even close. You know, we had some aircraft that came in and so on and so forth, but nothing like that.
Even when you were on the cruiser or the destroyer,
Yes.
you had it was. What?
No.
Hmm.
No, well, you see, that was, when we was on the cruiser, we had enough aircraft on there that we never had any trouble with the planes. Although they tried to get us, but they would get them shot down
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
they got to us. Now, some of the carriers, they weren't that lucky.
Right.
They did get some damage to them. But I would say that the Typhoons caused more damage than anything else that
Yeah.
they had out there.
Yeah. Oh.
Terrible.
I understand when you're in formation or an armada that you usually put the aircraft carriers in the middle of the battleships, and you guys would be out on the outer ring. Yeah.
Well, that was the only way we could protect any aircraft
Right.
that was
Right.
coming
Right.
in.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said living conditions were much better on the Liberty ship than they were on your Navy ship. Yeah. What were the living conditions like on the Astoria?
Well, our bunks were 4 high, and they were just a piece of canvas strapped to a framework. And of course, our showers, you were allowed a particular time on account of the shortage of the water. And the food, we ate a lot of Spam.
Oh.
Any way that they could fix Spam, and dried eggs, you know, and this sort of thing. Lots of beans.
Can you eat Spam to this day?
Pardon?
Could you eat Spam today?
I haven't touched the same since. No. Haven't touched the Spam since.
It must have been tough too, as a farm boy that was used to fresh milk and fresh eggs, to have to eat powdered eggs and powdered milk.
It was terrible. It really was. It was terrible.
Did you ever get? Sounds like you, with all the days at sea and long periods at sea, did you ever have R&R to get off and make sure?
One time in Luzon, and they had put some beer aboard our ship, and so when we got to Luzon, and they gave us some time off there, R&R, whatever you want to call it, why, they took the beer off our ship and took it down, and we drank their beer. Well, it made us sick. Well, I don't know what it was. But
What, local Filipino beer?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And we went swimming there, and we got a fungus in our ears, and we had a terrible time with that, you know, because had to wear earphones all the time, you know.
Mm.
So, but that was the only time that we had any R&R while we was over there.
Wow. That's a long stretch.
It was.
Oh boy.
Well, you see, we'd have, I think the longest time that we had to sea was 80 days. So you could imagine, you know. And when we'd had that 80 days to sea, that was when we went back and we got caught in that second typhoon, and they lost, I say we, they lost 2 or 3 destroyers in that. They just broke up. They couldn't go anymore. So that's about all I have now, unless you got some more questions.
Yeah. How was it as far as communications back home with either your folks or your wife? Was mail consistent? I mean, with you guys all over the Pacific, how was it getting mail to you guys, and how was it getting mail back and forth, or did you?
We didn't get any.
Is that right?
You know. And if you was a place where you could mail, it had to be, it was restricted, you know.
Very, very censored. And
Yep.
yeah. Because of that, I would imagine back here at home, your folks and your wife really had no idea where you were or what condition you were. Did they, after the war, ever talk about how they worried about that, or?
Well, they did.
Yeah.
But I wanted to forget it. I never did talk about it.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah, very few of you guys did, yeah.
Very, very little.
Yeah. Was it easy to, I guess kind of a two-part question, how was it, that transition from military Navy life back to civilian life, and was it easy for you to forget that period, or did
No, you still...
you were still thinking about it?
Yeah, you sure did.
Did that ever ease with time, or to this day do you still think about?
No, not anymore, but then I did at that time.
Yeah.
I felt so relieved that I got through all of that without having any problems, you know.
Well, the exception, you can attribute your hearing problems to that period.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you see, I get compensated for that. I belong to the BAB, and so, but that hearing thing, that's really bad. Some people don't realize, you know, you can stick these hearing aids in there, but then if you're in a crowd or whatever, there's so much that you miss that you never know. And even sitting there and watching that blooming TV, you don't catch all of it, you know. We have some people that don't understand that, you know. And it's a little disgusting.
Oh, sure, you bet.
A little disgusting that they don't understand it. So, anything else now?
Well, now, you talked about being part of Iwo and the Okinawa invasions. Were you guys involved with any other battles, or was that your the first 2 battles you guys got into?
Well,
how many battle stars altogether do you know that you guys got? Do you know? And that's something I can dig up to and find, but.
Well, you see, I told you about getting that thing from Russia.
Uh-huh. But then once you were on the Astoria, how many battles were you guys involved with there? Do you remember?
Oh, I got a whole list of them.
Oh, there are quite a few then. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you guys pretty much worked your way up the pipe to all the.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, they're. When I was trying to get my compensation for my hearing, I had to go through all of that. And I do have a list of every period that we were under
Okay.
fire or whatever.
Okay.
But gosh, I would say that several hundred probably.
Wow. What's that like for people like myself and others that have never been in battle? I mean, I haven't the slightest idea what it's like. What's it like to be in a battle like that with the noise and the commotion and fire everywhere? Can you give us just an idea what that's like from your viewpoint, from the way you saw things?
Well, in a way, it was very exciting. Well, say we had an attack, and every gun on the ship was firing, and you talk about racket, there was lots of racket, and watching those planes come in and or whatever, it was another experience that you'll never forget.
One thing I've always wondered about, and I've only seen this in newsreels and documentaries, is when you guys were under attack and there's planes flying everywhere and every one of the ships are shooting. I gotta assume stuff's flying through the air, landing all over the place, and you hitting.
You could see. Now you see the gun that I was on. It didn't have to hit a ship or a plane directly. When it got up there to a certain point, it exploded.
Kind of like a flak type of.
Yes. You see, when it went into the gun, there was a timer set on it automatically so that when you fired that gun and it got out there to a certain point, it exploded. And if there was anything within the range of it, it tore it up.
But I gotta assume with all these ships firing that there's stuff raining out of the sky onto. Huh. Wow.
Yeah, well, naturally there would be,
Yeah.
But then it was far enough away from us that none of it ever fell back on us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if that's what you're.
Yeah, that's what I've always wondered about, because it seems like you had ships all over and everybody's flying and shooting in every direction, and planes are flying. They're shooting direction. It just seems like it'd just be metals falling out of the sky everywhere. But
No,
okay.
it wasn't.
Okay.
No, you could see these things exploding up there in the air, all right, but then you see there was enough space between each ship that there was never anything fell back on top of it.
Okay. And I've always heard or read that whole process of getting your shell and whatever up and loaded, that was a pretty dangerous process, or potentially a pretty dangerous process of loading the guns. Not at all?
No.
Okay.
No, you see all of that, you see we had 2 handling service rooms, and all of that was handled by elevator. And then when it come up into the gun, why then a man had to take it out of that elevator and put it into the gun naturally. But while it was still in that elevator, that time fuse was set there, and then you put it in the, and of course your controls, this controlled the setting of the fuse, and it controlled the elevation and everything that the gun done.
Okay.
You see, that was the reason that they sent me to this electric hydraulic school, because all of this gun that controlled this was all electric hydraulic. So you had to keep that all repaired.
So not only were you an observer, but you had to maintenance
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you had to maintain your gun and naturally keep it painted.
Jeez. Oh boy. Sounds like you did your fair amount of painting in the service, huh?
Well, I didn't, but then I had a crew that did
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Now did the ship ever take a hit other than was there any other damage besides what it took in the typhoons? Were you ever hit by a shell or?
No,
Okay, yeah.
no,
So
never was.
yeah, lucky there. Huh?
No, had a lot of close ones, but never anything. Like I say, about the only ones that really got any, and they were after the cruisers naturally. So that was the ones that, if they could get to them, well, then there was damage there. So the only cruiser, or the only aircraft carrier that I know of was one out of the bunch, and it was hit by a torpedo, not from the aircraft. So, and when it was damaged, well, then we had to, I don't remember where we escorted it into some port somewhere. I don't remember where it was, for repair, and then we went back and joined the fleet.
That must have been a sight at some of the various battles, and I've always heard that forever you could just see ships out in the water. I mean, the size of the ships that would come in, and you'd look out, and as far as you could see, you would just see ships. That just must have been one incredible sight
It was.
to behold.
Well, I suppose that people that was up in the upper decks, you know, could see that, but from where we were, why, you didn't see, only just a few that was around you, you
Yeah.
know. But,
Were you, for example, when you were offering support at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, were you close enough where you could see what was going on the island, any of the action?
well, pretty close, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Were they giving you reports on how things were going on?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, well, I'm sure that you've seen pictures, but they had all those pillboxes, and well, that was what we was after, was bombarding those pillboxes and all that stuff.
Now, is that something your 5-inch gun would be used for as well, or was it
Yeah.
just anti-aircraft?
No.
Okay.
Not just a 5-inch, and then we had two 8-inch guns that they used also, that just for that purpose. They weren't any good for aircraft at all.
Mm.
Yeah.
I've always heard too, people that run cruisers, destroyers, that it was quite the sight and sound to hear when a battleship shot off a shell, one of those larger shells flying over you. And did you ever experience any of that?
No,
Okay.
No, because there was, well, any time that they was doing that, why, we were circling around.
Okay.
And ships was lined up one behind each other, you see, so that they were.
Wow. How was it as far as getting news and such from home and the world? Were you guys getting any sort of news? Did you ever pick up like Tokyo Rose broadcasts or anything
Oh,
like
yes.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, we got that quite often. Sure did.
Yeah.
She was quite a gal.
That's what I hear.
I am sure that she had spent some time in America somewhere, no doubt. She was very well informed anyway. Very well informed.
Yeah. How was it through the years? Did you ever keep in touch with anybody from the ships or go to any sort of reunions and such when anything in regards to that?
Well, they had a reunion for the Astoria up in Washington, but I didn't go. I got me a hat from it, and that was it. And I don't think that well, you see, they had to scrap the Astoria, and I don't think there's ever been one since.
Oh, okay, okay.
Never been one since. And I had a very close friend in the Navy, and we, for a couple of years afterwards, well, we communicated, and then they had problems and divorce and all this sort of thing, and haven't heard in years. So I have no idea what
Yeah.
happened to them.
Yeah. How do you think, Bill, that period of your life affected your life or played into your life? Did it play any role in your thinking the rest of your life, or was it just simply just that a chapter, a period of your life that you went through and you just moved on? How do you?
Well, I don't know. My wife tells me that I grow up to be
Is that right? Yeah.
a man. Yeah.
So she saw quite a difference when
Evidently.
you married and when you came back. She'd seen a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, that's what she said, that being in the Navy had made a man out of me.
Hmm. How long you guys been married?
64 and a half years.
Wow. Yeah. And any children?
4 boys.
4 boys?
And those boys are all going to Washington
Well,
while
that's
I'm
right.
there.
When you're going on the honor flight trip.
Yeah,
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
yeah. Yeah, they wanted me to spend some time there, but well, my wife has a little problem, and I didn't want to be gone that long.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
they would have loved for me to spend a few days with them, but I decided against that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we start to wind down this interview, Bill, is there anything that I didn't ask you, or anything else you wanted to talk about that you remember now that we left out, so we can make sure we finish out this interview? Anything else that you can think of that we didn't talk about?
Well, not that I know of. I answered all of your questions. And
Yeah.
So, well, you could shut it off and we'll look here.
Well, Bill, then in closing, is there any sort of closing statement or anything you'd like to say in regards to anybody that'll watch this down the road to close off this interview, or not?
Well, I am very happy that you did this for the simple reason that my boys and their families have, well, they've gotten some of the information, but
Right.
never quite this much.
Right.
And I think that, well, I know that they will appreciate it. So I would like to have a copy for each.
Oh, certainly. We'll certainly do that.
And do you want me to pay you for those?
We'll square up later. But well, in that case, then, Bill, I want to thank you for sitting down and telling your story. I think it's very important that it is recorded. But more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you.